Hello, 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 Barnes & Noble Book Club. It is so good to see you guys again, albeit virtually. I'm Miwa Messer. I'm the producer and host of Poured Over, and with me, I have my other partner in all things book, Lexie Smyth, who you guys have not yet met, but will be around these parts a little more going forward. And also Angie Kim, the woman of the hour. I'm so happy to see you again, Angie. The last time you and I got to hang out, we didn't get to do spoilers. We are doing all of the spoilers in this conversation. All of the spoilers will be here. So, folks, if you gave us questions when you registered on Eventbrite, I have those questions. If you want to use the chat to drop questions, you're more than welcome to do it there. You can also drop them in the Q&A module. If you have already given me an Eventbrite question, you don't have to repeat it in the chat if you don't want to. You can just hang out and listen, because we're going to do all of the stuff in this conversation. We're so excited to be here. So I want to get everything started off. Lexie, you and I share an office. I know why we chose this book for book club, but would you bring everyone else into the conversation and let them know why?
Absolutely. So Happiness Falls was one of the first books I read when I came on board here at Barnes & Noble, and it made me so excited to get back to my book selling roots. It's such a rich, layered story with like just so many elements to sink your teeth into. I mean, the opening line alone, we didn't call the police right away. Like I was fully in. And then the pace never stopped. And there are just so many wonderful elements about this book. Mia, the narrator's voice, the missing father, the philosophical questions about happiness and about language, and Eugene. I cannot wait to talk about Eugene.
We will get there. I promise we'll get there. Angie, it's really good to see you. I want to start with a question, though, that sort of has been percolating through some of the Eventbrite questions we got, which is, and Lexie, I'm going to ask you this question too, but what does happiness mean for you? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What's your experience of happiness?
Yeah, Miwa, first of all, can I just say how thrilling this has been? So for the last month or so, Happiness has been talking to people about this book.
Right.
Because this has been in my head for so long, and I've been in this closet. This is a literal closet where I write hello from here. And it's been amazing. And Happiness on the day of publication was actually like seeing my book on TV and then going out to my local Barnes and Noble at like 9 o'clock when they opened, and greeting customers and actually hand selling my own book to somebody right there, which was the funnest thing. It was also having my parents who couldn't be with us, who are in the villages, going to their Barnes and Noble and like taking pictures. So it's been a joy. And that's kind of, I mean, I'm sure we'll get more into happiness quotient and things like that, and expectations and baseline. But seriously, and I'm not just saying this because I can't really think of a big philosophical thing to say in like 10 seconds.
Right.
But seriously, it has been that it's getting to talk about spoilers and seeing what people think of the ending, and seeing what people think really happened, which I know we're going to get into. So
we're totally going to get into
the shorts and the note and all of that sort of
all
stuff.
of it. All of it. You and I were so good when we sat down for the show, and we did not do any. Oh, I was dying.
Well,
anyway.
we couldn't.
I know.
Really wanted to.
All right, Lexie, what's your definition of happiness?
I think for me, happiness is some combination of both contentment and joy. There's something about a sense of possibility there. I think when I feel happy, those are the things that I'm feeling.
Sorry, I am sucking down a little bit of caffeine. It's been a wild day today. So for me, honestly, it's books. It's books, it's writers, it's ideas, it's talking to other readers. Like, I am all about the life 24/7. It's just what I do, but it's awesome. I'm so glad that we get to do the thing that we get to do. And I'm really happy to see both of you, but I want to start with Lexie. What surprised you about Happiness Falls?
I mean, everything about this book surprised me. I think the thing that I love the most about this book is that it took several tropes and it really flipped them on their head immediately from the get-go. It's not a standard.
It's dad that goes missing, right? Mama is not missing. The teenage daughter is not missing. Angie, thank you very much for doing that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. I'm so glad.
Let's turn that around for a second. Like, dad goes missing. We're going to come to Eugene in a second, but you knew Miracle Creek obviously has a slightly different setup, but you had a pretty good idea what you were going to do with this cast in Happiness Falls when you sat down to write it, correct?
I mean, no, not really. So I knew
Oh,
this
okay.
cast so well, and I know this family very well because
Hmm.
I've written, stories about them since I started writing back in
Hmm.
2010.
Yep.
And so I've been thinking about them. And the question was, I didn't actually think that the dad was going to go missing in the beginning when I first started working on the
Okay.
story.
Okay.
I really thought it was a story about a quirky family that's trying to make their dad happy because he's ill or something like that. And they're
Hmm.
trying to get his book published, help him get his book published by carrying out these quirky experiments about
Right.
happiness. And so there was nothing nefarious or unethical about the
Right. Right.
happiness experiments. And then when I started like thinking about them from the daughter's perspective, Mia, and then I was like, oh, wow, dad experimented on us. That's so strange. And that's so unethical. And that's so not cool, dad. And so, like all of these little surprises that came to me, I
Right.
think
Okay.
show up on the page because they were surprises to me.
Okay. Okay. I have to say, Mia was kind of my point of entry into the story. I mean, she's mouthy, she's trying to figure out her weirdo family because everyone's parents are weirdos when you're in college. Then we have the added pressure, obviously, of lockdown and being at home when you would much rather be at college, not walking downstairs to get breakfast with your parents again. So you've actually put us in kind of a closed box,
Yeah.
almost like an Agatha Christie, right? Like,
Oh,
here's that
yeah.
pressure cooker, here's this family, all of whom lovely people. But I had a moment where I was like, okay, okay, I get it. Here we are.
Yeah. Especially coming back from college,
Yeah.
where, she's like a sophomore, she's like in her second year.
Hmm.
And I know because I have two kids who are in college right now. When you start college and you're very bright, you are just like even more unsufferable than usual, right? Because you are like, I know everything. And my parents really don't know anything at all. Like, how did I manage
Right.
to live with these people for 20 years of my life? And then to be forced to come back from that, I think is really kind of hard, right? So,
Well, I mean, also too, one of the things I appreciate, and you do this with all three of the kids, obviously, and Eugene is gonna get his own bit here, but you can be siblings in the same family and not have the same experience. And that's one of the things I really like. That was my favorite sort of surprise in the book, was the fact that all three of the kids had very sort of different experiences of the family unit. And, let's just say this at the top of the show, like, just because Eugene is nonverbal does not mean he's not paying attention, right?
right.
Like, there's this perception that he's somehow, because he is who he is, he's not participating in the world. And that's a conversation we need to have, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is something, sorry, I'm trying to answer a question in the chat. Lexie, can you pick up and run for a second? I'm having a
Sure.
problem typing here.
I mean, one of the big questions I had for you in reading the book, you flip so many tropes on their head. Did you set out to flip those scripts when you started writing the novel? Like, was that the purpose, or did it just sort of unwind as you started writing it?
Yeah, I don't think it was really the purpose. I think it just unwound in a very organic way for me. And I think Mia is kind of, I poured into Mia so much of my own obsessions and so many of my own pet peeves and things that I'm passionate about and that I get really irked about, especially it's really fun to be in Mia's head and get irked
Mm-hmm.
about something because I tend to be like a people pleaser. I'm very insecure from my own like immigrant, experience. And so I tend to be like, oh, I'm gonna try to be nice. I want people to like me. Mia is not like that at all. She does not give a, I'm not gonna, I don't know if I'm allowed to. Okay,
Well, here's the thing.
I will keep
If
my
you
mouth.
really, really
Please.
want to swear, you can.
No,
But
no,
I'll
no,
tell
no,
you,
no, I won't.
even
No.
I managed to not swear in
Yes,
the
no,
book.
I know.
So, and you've met me,
Yes, I'm taking my cue from you. So she is, so, it's really, really fun to be in her head. And so it's when I'm in her head, like all these things that I'm thinking and
Mhm.
that I want to vent about and that I want to like go off about literature and about like the tropes that we have and about things like, why is it that when you have a biracial family in fiction, like they're always depicted as like all being this beautiful mix of, the two different races and like, and you're like, no, that's not how life works. I know because I have kids who are biracial. And Miwa, I know that you
I was about to say, as the halfie on the screen, we're I remember what my adolescence was like, and I remember what my brother's adolescence was like,
and they're totally different, right? Exactly.
Completely.
And there are all these like different dynamics. So, Mia being, more Asian presenting and, and also a girl, which when they lived in Korea, that was like a big thing that gave her a lot of angst. And so all of that sort of stuff like came out and and there is the dad's mystery and that is kind of the Trojan horse that I used to pull the readers in, and hopefully everybody did get pulled in, but that to me is just the container. And there are all these stories about the family that I have amassed over the last 10 years that I wanted to tell, that because they're just so fun, and also they just really tell you so much about how they're going to respond to this situation and to Eugene and all of that.
So didn't you tell me that you'd sort of thought about starting this as a short story, right? Like we're in Korea, it's the visit to the graveyard. Like that was going to be a really different book. Yes, a really different book.
Absolutely. And so that was actually published as a short story, as a standalone. And then after that, I thought I would take the same family, the same people, because I just love them so much. They're so quirky. And I really did think that it was going to be these, things, really fun, happiness quotient experiments, done for the dad.
Right.
And, to me, that was just so fun. And it didn't have any of the drama in with a capital D, with like all the tears and all the deaths and grief and things like that my debut novel had, that I was kind of like, oh, maybe I want to get away from that. And then of course what happened was I really thought, one thing that I really want to explore is Eugene and his non-speaking. And I knew that there were all these therapies going on to kind of unlock the words that are in, kids like Eugene, and with great success that, of kids that I knew, my dear friends' children. And so I really wanted to explore that. And I thought in order to explore that, I really want a situation where he knows something and the family, it's like a matter of life and death. The family needs to be able to communicate with Eugene. How do we do that?
Right. And
what Lexie, is that situation?
Yeah, you and I talked about this a lot in the office when you were figuring out where we were going with this book. And I mean, like, really, we talked about this a lot in the office. But I remember you telling me one of the things you really loved is the fact that every kid was each of the three children is super distinct and had their own very, very specific kind of POV. And also that they weren't kind of caricatures of young voices. Because, I mean, listen, we all do the best we can with what we have, but kids are, Angie, I know you live with three of your own, but at the same time, like, kids can be hard to render on the page. And I'm lumping in young adults with kids. Okay, apologies to anyone who's a young adult who's here. But like, your brain isn't fully cooked. You're figuring out where you are and everything else. And you're giving these kids big ideas and access to big ideas. And Lexie, there was something you said to me, I think maybe it was about Mia, where you were just like, oh yeah, like this girl really got under my skin. Like she's processing all of this happiness quotient stuff. Can you just let everyone else know what you and I were talking about?
It was so fascinating to me to read a young adult character where this person is really grappling with these big ideas and these big issues. I think we like to chalk, like there are a lot of sort of caricatures of what young people are like.
Right.
And what I think was one of the most interesting devices in the novel, particularly through Mia's voice, was the use of footnotes, which to
Yes.
me, I read as like, sometimes I have these sort of thought processes that run off, like I go on tangents. And this was kind of her way of structuring her many thoughts about that. That really got under my skin. Her voice got under my skin.
Yeah.
The way she was observing everything about her family. And I think putting them in the sort of COVID lockdown lockbox, like, I don't know about the rest of you. I spent my, lockdown of the pandemic with one other person, and I learned so much about who they were, both good and bad. And I cannot imagine having been a teenager and doing that with my parents. Just everything about her was so nuanced and so specific.
Yeah, Linda George loves the footnotes too. So I just want to shout her out because I really did love the footnotes. I think that's also how we speak and how we think. I mean, and Lexie, I don't think it's just you and me thinking in footnotes. Like I think in general, people think in footnotes. Was that one of the big surprises for you, Angie, though? I mean, did you plan on footnotes? Because it's not something you see a lot in fiction.
Yeah, I do love footnotes in fiction. There are so many books like Tim O'Brien's In the Lake of the Woods, which I have in front of me that I was reading. That's also a missing person story. That has footnotes, and I love so special topics in calamity physics is one of my favorites, and but I didn't mean to do it as footnotes, and what happened was I kept on putting them in parentheticals just because there were so many aside. That's just the way it was in her head. It was like, oh, this is interesting, and I don't want to lose that. And at some point, one of them got so long that I was like, I don't even remember what we were talking about. So I put it in footnotes, sort of, to organize myself. And then I thought, you know what? Mia is always talking about how she's being told by her mom, like, Mia, you need to stop, and you need to stop going down these rabbit holes, and you need to actually like focus, Mia. So she's always been hearing that for her entire life. And it just came to me that, you know what, this is the way she would do it. She would put it in footnotes for people like her mom, who she knows get annoyed, and be like, see, I am trying my best. I am really trying hard here. I am going to put these in footnotes so that the people like my mom, whom I love, who are getting annoyed by these, can just skip right over them. And the people who do like them, like my dad and me, can read it. And so I thought it was like a great way of her trying to be mature, trying to be less self-involved, and a little more responsible and sensitive to those around her.
I love that answer so much because you can see Mia trying to figure it all out. You can.
Yeah, right.
But one of the other things I really appreciate too about Happiness Falls is the fact that the three kids are a unit, that they are very much siblings who love one another, and Eugene is not your average kid. So I'd like to talk about Eugene's background and his sort of, what do we want to call, how do you describe what he has? It's
a dual diagnosis of autism and Angelman syndrome, and it's a mosaic form of Angelman syndrome, which is a very rare genetic condition. And I actually did a book club with Angelman Syndrome Foundation with all Angelman parents and grandparents and things like that yesterday. And so it was really interesting because I discovered the condition after I had this image of Eugene in my mind. And one of the things about him that, even from my short story and all that sort of stuff, it is something that I just sort of thought of him as always happy, as always having this big smile, being non-speaking, and having some of these repetitive movements like jumping when he gets stressed and things like that. But he always had the smile. So this outward marker of happiness, did that mean that he was happy? Because I did a lot of thinking about what happiness, really does mean, like that micro level hedonistic, where you're smiling, where you're hearing a joke and you're laughing, like that's a one level of happiness. But then at the same time, he has these digestive issues. He has, a lot of kids with Angelman syndrome have seizures.
Mhm.
And he can't communicate, so he can't connect in that way
Right.
with his family. So is that happiness, even if he's smiling and laughing all the time? So it really was thinking about what happiness does mean at the micro level,
Right.
at the macro level. And how do you begin to process that, especially for your child, somebody that you love, that I sort of came up with, how do we figure out a way to give him that and give him that
Right.
dignity of being non-speaking and yet still having so many thoughts that they know he's in there, they just don't know how to quite connect.
Right. So I'm going to drop in a question for both of you from the audience. Christine Passanello, I don't know if you're here, but I hope you are. Did the book change your mind about anything or give you a new perspective?
Oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Mhm. Okay.
Go ahead, Lexie. Yeah.
I think one of the things I loved the most about this book, and I'm dropping a spoiler here, is, once they figured out how to communicate with Eugene, um, I realized how many books there are out there that sort of use this trope of neurodivergent children being a mystery, being
Mhm.
mysterious, being unknowable. And I loved that Eugene had this distinct personality.
Mhm.
He was observing everyone in his family. He just couldn't participate because he couldn't communicate with them in the way that they communicated with each other. And it really had me thinking about, like, what even is language? Like,
Mhm.
what is language? What is it? Just because I'm speaking to someone doesn't mean that someone who is nonverbal or non-speaking can't communicate. What that says about what we think about people's intelligence, or what's going on with them mentally.
Mhm.
It really changed my perspective on what language is, who gets to communicate, and like how they get to communicate.
Yeah, I love that.
Angie?
I love that so much.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, so I think in the process of researching this novel, I
Yep.
came to know this community of non-speakers much more intimately than I had before I started writing. So, obvious, and now I teach creative writing
Yeah.
to about 3 groups of about 20 non-speakers. So getting to know their writing and just realizing that it's not just a matter of using language to communicate, but also just to express our ideas to the world and creating art, which is what they're trying to do also. Which didn't really occur to me because in the context of a family, you think of things like, yeah, communicating, I'm hungry, or, like your basic needs, and it goes so beyond that. And so that was one thing. And then about happiness too, I really was struggling with my idea of how can you maximize happiness? Can you increase it by trying to lower your expectations, by trying to lower your baseline, all of those types of things? um which kind of sounded silly to me a little bit, but in the course of thinking through some of these experiments that the father does, not really doing any on my own children, but still talking it through with them and all of that sort of stuff, I think it really did help me figure out um how to try to sort of maximize it for myself. Like, so when Happiness Falls came out, instead of being like what I tried to do with Miracle Creek, my debut, which
Right.
was I tried to just have as low expectations as possible. And I was, which is good because, then when get the good reviews, you're like, yay, I'm so
Right.
happy. But it's kind of a bummer in the meantime, when you're like
Yeah.
telling yourself, yeah, everybody's going to hate this book. I'm going to get bad reviews. Whereas with this one, I allowed myself to have those silly fantasies and dreams and hopes and expectations. But I remembered back to my baseline as a
Right.
writer.
I
And
also, oh,
yeah,
sorry.
no, I was going to say, and as a writer, I think your baseline is always starting that story, having no idea if you're actually going to be able to successfully finish it, let alone get an agent, have a book deal, see it in the stores. You know?
I think that's definitely true. I think sitting down to write is an act of hope, no matter what.
Yeah,
I mean, you can be
absolutely.
writing a gruesome, like we have seen some stuff, but the reality is that reading is an act of connection. And I do believe that sitting down to write is an act of hope. I do want to come back to this language thing for a second, though, because also, I mean, Angie, your childhood was a little complicated by language and some other things. You came to the States from Korea as a tiny person and had a rougher entry than some. And, you know, obviously there is also in some parts this idea that if you have a rough go of it with English, that also you are not particularly intelligent. And that's something that, you know, I think a lot of us have done to you know, we show up and we dissuade these ideas, but I think that had to have been in the back of your brain a little bit as you wrote Happiness Falls, right? I mean, here you are, you know, a brainy little kid, but honestly, you had folks around you who, because Korean was your first language, were thinking you were not the sharpest stick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think possibly it was because I came over when I was in middle school, and middle school is just such a hard time, and kids are so mean anyway. And yeah, so I went overnight from feeling really smart and, you know, being at the top of my class and, you know, and being very outgoing, having lots of friends, to all of a sudden, not having a voice and not being able to communicate, and really seeing for the first time that we do really equate oral fluency with intelligence.
Right.
And I did it myself. So I felt stupid. I felt like a bobble. I knew that other kids thought the same thing of me, and my teachers and people like that too. You know, they were well-meaning, but they clearly felt sorry for me. And, you know, and then when I got to understand English a little better, I saw that they were actually talking about me in front of me, which is a particularly humiliating experience, which is one of the reasons why I'm like so insecure even to this day, you know? And so if this temporary experience impacted me so much, then what is it like for people like Eugene and my students who have to deal with this their entire lives, who have no outlet, even in another language as I did, you know, and who really do feel that shame all the time. People are talking about them in front of them all the time.
Right.
You know?
Right. And I have to say, I mean, I had a lot of empathy, and I still have a lot of empathy for Eugene. But can we talk about the shorts and the notes?
Yay. We have been wanting to do this.
Yes, you and I have been
so
we have,
long,
but we were so good. We were so good not busting out any of this. But I mean, Eugene to me was always a teenager, right? Like there's that moment where you're suggesting dad's having an affair, and I'm like, oh man, he's dragging his kid. And then we realize that it's a doctor and there's therapy happening and everything else. But I did have a moment of, oh, seriously? Ew. Okay, fine. But let's talk about Eugene being Eugene, and because I think Eugene knows more than his family thinks he does.
Oh yeah, he definitely.
I think those.
What do you think? What do you guys think? Miwa, Lexie,
I think the shorts got washed. I think the shorts got washed. I think there is. I think Eugene needs to get right with his conscience. I think I think our friend was not helpful when his dad went sliding down the cliff face. I don't think he necessarily pushed dad, but he certainly didn't stop it from happening. Yeah. So
Lexie, I mean, you feel the same way?
I feel the same way. Yeah, I think Eugene, and I think that's one of the things that was the most genius about this book to me, is that like Eugene is a fully formed character. And he has autonomy. And he has agency in this world. And again, that's part of the whole conversation around language and everything, where it was like, just because I think what was so interesting to me is when we can't communicate with someone, we assume that it's that person that has the intellectual deficit.
Yeah.
and not us for being
Right.
incapable of communicating with
Yeah.
them. And I everything about Eugene, I loved it. I loved him so much. He's a teenager. He's a fully formed character. He's
Yeah.
a full person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting to me because I really think Eugene, I think I have a weird view of Eugene because I view him as Mia does, and
Right.
maybe sometimes as the mom does,
Yeah.
as this, 14-year-old kid. And I have a 14-year-old kid, and I know how amazing he is. But I can't help but think of him as a baby.
Right.
And so when I catch him like making up some sophisticated story to make up an excuse of why he didn't do something that we told him to do, I kind of catch myself being surprised a little bit, like,
Yeah.
oh, but that's my baby. He doesn't know anything. And so I think of Eugene a little bit in that way. And that's why Mia has that footnote about, hey, we infantilize
Mhm.
people who are non-speakers like Eugene. Are we doing the same thing here by like giving him an out? And John is like, what? No. Of course he's innocent. He's amazing. He's our brother. And I don't think that you killed dad. And but yeah, no, I'm not sure either. And I think he's a lot more sophisticated in forming the story than maybe we give him credit for.
John feels naive to me. Older brother feels like he's living in like not fantasy land. I don't want to be dismissive of him. He's not. But he has that sort of like, people are good. People are fundamentally good. We all want to come together and help you. And I'm sorry, my Boston is showing. I don't always have the warm fuzzies about people and their motives.
No,
it might be,
absolutely.
But so he was kind of an interesting, because sometimes the men are not written that way. And I appreciated having a teenage boy who was much more in touch with his feelings, actually more so than his sister.
Much more so.
His sister was like, ugh, feelings, ew, gross, get away from me. No, I don't want those. But she's able to express a much fuller range of experience because she's being her scientific Mia poke self, which I thought that was kind of fun, because we don't, again, you flipped that kind of trope where the teenage girl is not the weepy, oh, let's fix the world. And it's her brother who's like, no, I can fix the world. And it's like, well, sweetie, that's adorable. But
yeah, exactly. And of course, we're seeing everything through Mia's eyes. So that's the other thing, is that, if we were actually seeing it through John's eyes, he might be like, I don't know why she thinks that I'm like this. I'm not really. And I have all these sophisticated feelings. But she sees, and she also sees mom and dad as being very, unsophisticated too. They're kind of like these blobs, right? They're not real people.
Yeah. But wait, our parents are supposed to be people? I thought our parents were just our parents. Like,
right, exactly.
That's like the biggest revelation ever, when you're like, oh, my parents had a life before me. Like, are you kidding? I see the photos and I'm like, wow.
The photos and like even like his notebook. That's why I think she was like freaked out as all get out, Like I think if I'd written this from Hannah, the mom's perspective, and she had found the notebook, she would have been like, okay, let's go through real quickly. Nothing really relevant to him being missing here. Let's worry about that later. She wouldn't have gone through it the same way that Mia did.
I do appreciate that difference in POV. Again, like, everyone here is so fully formed. Actually, I'm noticing Maria Rossel, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Marie, excuse me. She's not sure dad went down the cliff.
I know, I saw that.
And I was like, well, I can see how you would think that. And also, we don't actually know. So she could be entirely right. But I still think dad went down the cliff.
I think dad went down the cliff too. But but there are people who have gone down cliffs and survived miraculously. There are those people, so that is the thing. And this park is actually like based on a kind of a real park, Great Falls Park. And a lot of people go missing around there and drown. And then, their bodies never wash up because they got trapped in the water and rocks and whatever. And it's really, really hard for the people who are left behind, because you always have that kernel of hope. You're always like, well, maybe.
Lexie and I are city people, and I'm totally speaking on our behalf, but I love national parks and I'm perfect, but I'm also perfectly happy to not get up to the edge. I'm meant for sidewalks
Yes.
and the subway
Yep.
and, all I know my limits. Now, I do also like to climb things and hike and all of that, but I'm not a backcountry, leave a note on the car, and if you don't come back by the date you're specified, we're going to send a search and rescue team. I'm not that person. Clearly marked path. Delightful.
Definitely.
Perfectly delightful.
Definitely.
Joe Liz Beskow. I should have worn my glasses. I'm so sorry, guys. I have to get really up close to the screen. Joe Liz Beskow says, I do think Eugene heard John and Mia telling their theory and pretended to be sleeping. He's absolutely smarter than anyone gives him credit for. And I think everyone here agrees that Eugene, Eugene.
I love this.
Yeah.
I really, really love this because I really do have this thing about, like we really do think that people who have disabilities and who can't speak, that they're not as smart, like in that devious way, like maybe they can do math and maybe they're geeky and nerdy, but they're not like the, clever people. I kind of think, I mean, again, everything that I think is filtered through Mia's, and I have no idea what happened or what I think outside of what I wrote, because that's just my writing process. But I sort of, most of the time, I think that Eugene was asleep, but lightly. And like, do you have that thing? I have this thing all the time where I fall asleep when I'm watching a movie, and then whatever's happening on the movie like kind of seeps into my dreams, and the next day I'll tell my family, I'll be like, guys, I had the most weird dream yesterday, and this and this and this happened in my dream, and they'll be like, you are just talking about the plot of the movie that you slept through. And I'll be like, oh, that's so interesting. So I think something like that could have happened, where like he overheard it, from Mia and John talking, and that kind of seeps in through his memories. It was such a traumatic experience that he went through, and that influences the way he remembers, which is what happens with traumatic memories,
Without a doubt. I don't want us to get away from the music piece either, which we haven't really been able to work in until now, because music and math and analytics all sit on the same sort of continuum, right? Like also language. So if you're good with language, if you can pick up languages quickly, you tend to have a facility with music and also mathematics / analytics kind of thing. Which that was told to me by an uncle who was a genuine rocket scientist. So maybe I'm off the reservation a little bit. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure they are in a continuum.
Totally on a continuum. And that's one of the reasons why, Mia is very into music. And she also, is very into the rhythm of language too, and I think that all these things are related and things that I'm really, really excited about. Oh, I'm seeing such fun, cute questions in the Q&A.
Well, here's the other thing. So are we getting a movie? Mary Beth Pomeroy is asking if we're getting a movie version.
That's so interesting that you're asking that, because this week I have now talked to, I think, like 3 producers, and I'm continuing to talk to all of them this week and next week. And so fingers crossed that we find the perfect people to, take this into a movie or maybe limited series, something like that.
Greg Barbie is asking how we got the Books jacket, which is pretty fantastic.
Oh yeah. We went through many different cover designers, and then one day after we were like, no, mostly my editor, they just came and they had this swirly thing, and I just love this so much because it has this DNA helix kind of, it looks like a helix, which is, so part of, and then there's the duality, there's the front and back, which are the different sides. And I just love that it just brings in that cerebral thing. And I love that it's got the full moon.
Yep.
Because of the full moon at the end of the book, which is, just really, really special to me because it's tied to the harvest moon and the Korean Chuseok and all of that. Oh, and Miwa, did I tell you about this? I don't know if I even told you about this as
Okay.
many times as we've talked about this. The moon and the harvest moon. When I first started writing this story back in 2020, I just picked a date when the dad went missing. Just total, I just picked it. It was just like, it had no meaning. And then 3 years later, when I'm like finishing it up and I'm thinking like, what's the 100 days? And I'm counting the 100 days on the calendar, and I come to the date and I come to see, and I look it up to see what's happening with the moon on that day, because I wanted to somehow try to incorporate that kind of stuff. It is Korean Chuseok. It is harvest moon. And it is a day when you look at the positions of the moon and the suns from, Virginia, where I am, it is a day when the moon set and the sun rise happen within like 30 minutes of each other. It was unbelievable. I was like, I called my editor and I was like, David, you would not believe it's meant to be. So it was very, very cool.
David would totally believe it. He's a good.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, no, absolutely. He loved it. He was like, I'm getting chills. I'm getting so many chills. Yeah.
Lexie, what did I miss? I know you had more questions and I want to make sure I don't miss them, but we hit most of them, but I know there's something else, Lexie.
We hit most of them, but I have another spoilery question. I know you said that Mia really believes in Eugene, but if she does, why did she erase her father's phone? Was it an act of love and faith in Eugene, or was it an act of insurance for Eugene, or was it both?
I think it was both. I think it was an act of insurance. And also, she knew that if she brought the phone to the family and said, here is the code, I think I figured it out, then they might want to, go ahead and open it. And she was afraid also of who might have tampered with the shorts. So if it was mom, or I think more likely John, then that, even if everything was completely correct, and let's say that Eugene was telling it exactly the way it was, but that note happened to be just an act of insurance by mom or John, then she would be giving them up too. So it's kind of like holding the whole family together, and also really showing that, you know what, as much as she hates ambiguous endings, she loves knowing, she needs to know, that is like a core element of her being a part of this family, and keeping Eugene safe is more important than that. So I really felt like it was a coming of age moment for her, when she really decides, you know what, it's not all about me. It's not all about getting proof and knowing. It's about being with my family, and that's more important.
And I think, honestly, I suspect I might have done the same thing. I might have.
Really?
I don't know. Here's the thing. One of the things I really appreciate about Happiness Falls and this particular family and what you've done in this book is I'm still thinking about it. I'm still rolling it around in my head. And Lexie and I read, between the two of us, we read a lot of books. We read a lot of books. And it's still sort of sticking in the back of my brain. Patty Fusco just jumped in and said, I liked that we didn't 100% know what happened and who did what. It left us wondering about it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, I don't have a straight up answer. I also don't need a pat ending. I need the ending that feels organic and right to the story.
Yes.
But I don't have to like all the characters. I don't have to have I just want a thing that's going to make me think. That's what I really want more than anything. I want to be pushed a little bit when I'm reading. And did you do that in, you did it in so many ways.
That's so cool. And Marianne says, I love an ambiguous ending. I do too. I mean, it's kind of frustrating, but the fact that I didn't know what happened to the dad the entire way through, that's what kept me coming back to this spot to keep on writing. And hopefully that element of surprise and suspense and, frustration and wanting to figure it out, hopefully that really came through, because I do feel like it's kind of like method acting, if the actor really feels it, somehow the audience knows, even if you can't fake it. And I feel the same way about writing. Like, I feel like you can't really fake it. And if I really already know what's happened, but to the end, I feel like it kind of comes through. So that's just me.
Well, I think you're totally right.
Yeah. And I think being in a family is kind of ambiguous. You
Mhm.
can't truly know anyone, and you do kind of have to believe in them and have faith in them if you really are going to be a family unit.
Mhm. Mhm. You guys, I knew this was going to happen, you women. We've hit time. This happens. I knew it was going to happen. So, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We're back next month with our new pick. Lexie, we've announced that publicly, right?
Yes, the
Okay, great.
prospectors.
Okay, sorry.
I've
I had a moment of what day is it? Because so much has been announced recently. Angie, it is always good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us, audience. Hopefully we'll see you next month virtually. You know where to find us. And Lexie, I think we need to keep doing this, don't you think?
I agree.
You and I should keep doing it. All right.
I agree.
Anyway, thanks everyone. This was awesome. Angie, it is always so good to see you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll see you later. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.